Couple of years ago, my now husband and I moved into our first home. Right off the bat, our not-so-normal home began to experience some paranormal activity. Nothing too weird. Things moving around, light tapping, or banging. Nothing too sinister. After a while of living together, we decided to try for a baby, and were able to conceive. 9 months later, out came our daughter. Now that might sound a bit unnecessary, but the problems seemed to start when we brought her home. The first 2 nights were okay, other than a massive lack of sleep, but night 3, it got a little worse. The light tapping began to get louder, more aggressive. The worst part was that we started hearing it more on our baby monitor, rather than anywhere in our house. When we'd hear it, we'd watch for a few moments, only to realize that her eyes were open. She wasn't crying, she wasn't fussing, she was just awake, looking around. The scariest part was when she looked up at what was the ceiling and just seemed to start smiling. To this day, we don't know what she was looking at. We were just happy that she was okay. Alright, now, bear with me. No, the title isn't misleading. I just need to start from the beginning. My daughter is now 6, and the problem seems to re-escalate. From banging on the walls, throwing things around. My daughter even told me that she has heard scratching coming from under her bed and in her closet. There's just one factor that I just can't shake, and that's the fact that she doesn't seem scared or worried. Recently, she's been sitting on the edge of the basement stairs, talking to nothing but darkness. When she spots me, she just looks up and smiles. My most vivid memory of this happened just last night. I was just getting her ready for bed, and while I was grabbing her before bed, snack and drink, she was right behind me. When I turned around, she wasn't there. I set her snack and drink down on her island, and when I went around the corner, there she was, whispering into the abyss. I got closer to her, and among her whispering, I could have sworn I heard something whispering back. Normally, my daughter turns around upon hearing me approach, but this time, it was as if I no longer existed. I think you're starting to scare my mama, she whispered. No shit, I was scared. The second I put my hand on her shoulder, she jerked her little head back towards me. That was the first time I saw fear in her eyes. It soon relaxed when I pulled her up and shut the door. I still don't know why she looked at me so frightened. I hadn't meant to scare her, nor did I expect a reaction. During this time, my husband was a month into his work trip, 3 states away. I decided to test something out, and asked my mom to look after her for a night or 2. Though hesitant, she agreed, and took my daughter in for a few nights. Within these 2 nights, I decided to experiment. I noticed that while I slept, the sounds didn't seem to appear. I even downloaded a sleep app to document whether a sound may have been made. During the first night alone, I went downstairs for a snack, and the basement door was open. I didn't think much of it, and shut it. During the second night, a similar thing happened. Only this time, when I shut the door, I heard something crash downstairs and run up the stairs, and begin scratching at the unlocked door. After nearly succumbing to a heart attack, I proceeded to run upstairs, and call my poor husband, who was asleep. I explained the situation, and he told me to get a security camera. What he told me next was something I didn't want to hear. Why don't you put it in the basement? Sure, let me just venture into the demonic basement to install a camera in order to catch what your child has been talking into the dark. Sure enough, I ordered a security camera that same night, and decided to go to sleep. By the next morning, there was a message on our answering machine, sent from my mom. She was basically telling me to come get my daughter, and that I needed to get her exercise. Here's a transcript. I must note that some things were a bit muffled, so I had to try my best. Hey honey, I had no clue why you asked me to watch your daughter for a few nights. I was thrilled to spend time with my grandchild, but inaudible, her. She always spends 10 minutes before our bed staring down my basement stairs, or down my hallway, or anywhere there is complete darkness, and she just talks. When she finally goes to sleep, there's about an hour before all hell breaks loose. Inaudible. Please, come get her. I want my calm back. I felt so bad. I knew I shouldn't have put her through that, but it was better her than a complete stranger. Upon hearing the message, I rushed to get my daughter. When I finally made it to my mom's house, I found my daughter in tears, dreading going back home. She clung to me tightly and just sobbed in my arms. I felt bad at first, almost mad, wondering what my mom had done to her. My daughter, a girl who rarely felt any emotions other than happiness, was crying. But then I remembered, 2 nights earlier, she looked at me with pure terror on her face. I was furious until I heard my daughter whisper something into my ear. I couldn't tell what she said at first, so I pulled her back slightly and asked her to repeat herself. He won't let me, and not asleep. He wants me to come home. I nearly dropped her. Thanking my mom, I rushed to put my daughter in her seat and rushed the 2 of us back home. Luckily, my security camera came, and I was able to set it up on the fireplace, pointed right at the kitchen and the basement. The moment we got home, it was like no time had passed. She was no longer sad, we had fun, and I felt a little better. But like clockwork, by the time her bedtime came along, she asked for her snack and drink and went right to her spot. This time, she looks up at me and says, "Don't look into the dark." By now, I'm pissing my pants. I'm dragging her to her bed, disregarding her snack, ready to call a priest. The next day, I refused to leave my room until my husband got home. I let my daughter come into my room and we spent the time watching TV. When he finally got home, I insisted we look over the footage from last night. I didn't know we'd see exactly what was in the basement. When we looked over the footage, I saw that our daughter had gotten out of her bed and went to sit in her usual spot. What came from the darkness was purely terrifying. It looked like a figure, almost human-like. It had black holes for eyes. It looked skinned, yet it had patches of skin around some spots. I watched as the 2 talked. I skipped through a bit until I see her nod and walk towards the camera, pushing it downwards. It stayed that way until we fixed it this afternoon. Since then, we had moved, and haven't really had any experiences lately. At least nothing like that. I don't know what it was I saw, but to this day, I refuse to look into any little bits of darkness. I refuse to go into any basement, and I refuse to let my daughter sit in complete darkness alone. She's in her teens now, and doesn't seem to have any recollection of this ever happening. I just need answers. What was talking to my daughter? And is there a possibility of it ever coming back? Please, help me.